The prefrontal cortex is shrinking, or at least it's under siege. Across the globe, chronic stress, digital overload, poor sleep, and toxic habits are chipping away at the part of our brain responsible for empathy, self-control, long-term thinking, and moral judgment. Studies now show that overuse of screens and constant distraction can reduce activity and even volume in the prefrontal cortex, especially in children and young adults. And the results? Rising anxiety, shorter attention spans, more impulsive behavior. A world fraying at the edges. But there's a deeper story here. In this episode, we will ask, what does it mean to hold captive every thought? Not just as an ancient command, but as a survival skill for the modern mind. Could reclaiming our inner world be the key to healing ourselves and society? Listen to this podcast and decide for yourself.
Have you ever found yourself kind of stuck in a loop? Maybe replaying an awkward conversation over and over?
Oh, definitely.
Or maybe, wrestling with those anxious thoughts that just seem to cling on no matter what you do.
Yeah, it's a feeling I think everyone recognizes. It feels like your own mind is working against you sometimes.
Exactly. And if that sounds familiar to you listening, well, you're tapping into something deeply human, a really universal challenge.
It absolutely is. And people, well, they've been grappling with this for centuries across all kinds of cultures.
Right. And that's actually what we're diving into today. We've taken a really deep look at this essay. It's titled, Hold Captive Every Thought, A Journey into the Mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's compelling stuff because it doesn't just stick to one perspective. It explores this whole struggle from a fascinating mix of viewpoints.
Yeah, it really pulls together insights from, modern science, but also ancient philosophy, different world religions, and it looks specifically at what the New Testament has to say too.
It's trying to find those common threads, but also the unique angles. So our mission really with this deep dive is to unpack all that, distill the key insights, and figure out what it could mean for you. How can these different ways of looking at it help you find maybe greater awareness, more peace, and live with a bit more intention?
Yeah, it's exploring how we move from feeling kind of pushed around by our inner chatter to, cultivating a sense of agency, maybe some real peace inside.
Okay, let's get into it.
Mm-hmm.
The essay starts with the science, specifically neuroscience, and maybe we should too, because the news from that field, it's actually pretty exciting.
It really is. For a long time, the thinking was that the adult brain was pretty much fixed, set in stone.
Right.
But neuroscience has shown us this incredible thing called neuroplasticity. It's the brain's ability to literally rewire itself, to change its structure, its function based on our experiences, where we put our focus, intentional practices.
That alone is powerful, isn't it? The idea that your brain isn't just stuck the way it is. And the essay highlights this core principle. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Can you unpack that a bit? What does that mean practically?
Sure. Think of it like pathways in a forest. Every time you have a thought, a specific group of neurons activates, right?
Okay.
If you keep having that same thought, maybe it's worrying about something, maybe it's dwelling on a mistake, or maybe it's practicing gratitude, those same neurons fire together again and again.
Strengthening the connection.
Exactly. The more they fire together, the stronger that pathway becomes.
Yeah.
You're literally building and reinforcing certain neural highways with your repeated thoughts.
So am I hearing this right? The more I worry, the better my brain gets at worrying.
Well, in a manner of speaking, yes. You're strengthening the neural circuits for worry. But the flip side, the really encouraging part the essay stresses, is how quickly this can shift.
Okay.
Measurable changes in the brain structure. Function, they've been seen in as little as 8 weeks of consistent mindfulness meditation.
8 weeks. Wow, that feels remarkably fast for changing the brain.
It is. And even small, consistent efforts can make a difference. The essay mentions that just 5 or 10 minutes a day, focusing your attention, practicing mindfulness, that can start to improve your focus and make you less reactive to stress.
And these intentional habits, practiced over time, can lead to more lasting structural changes.
Precisely. The essay points out that things like mindfulness can actually lead to a thickening of the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain doing the heavy lifting for decision-making, planning, regulating how we act around others.
The executive control center.
Right. And at the same time, activity in the amygdala, that's like the brain's alarm system, involved in fear and stress, that activity can actually decrease.
So by deliberately guiding our thoughts, we can physically build up the thinking part of the brain and dial down the reacting part. That really makes how we think shapes who we become feel very concrete.
It does. It brings it down to the biological level. And the essay also digs into the role of attention and something called the default mode network, the DMN.
Ah, yes, the DMN. That's the mind-wandering network, isn't it, when we're just zoning out?
Basically, yes. It's active when you're not focused on a specific external task. Daydreaming, letting your mind roam. And the essay notes that when this network is just left to its own devices, it often drifts into rumination.
And rumination is like getting stuck on repeat with negative thoughts.
Exactly. It's repeatedly chewing over worries or regrets or maybe perceived insults, but without actually finding any solution, just going round and round.
Like a hamster wheel for the mind.
That's a good way to put it. And the essay highlights that this kind of rumination is strongly linked with higher levels of anxiety and depression.
So an unchecked DMN can kind of become an anxiety factory. What does the science suggest we can do about that?
Well, practices like mindfulness meditation really come into play here. At its heart, mindfulness is about noticing when your mind has wandered and gently bringing your attention back, usually to the breath or bodily sensations. Studies show this helps quiet down that default mode network.
So it's training attention, learning to observe the thought without getting totally sucked in.
Right. You create a bit of space.
That sounds very practical.
Yeah.
The essay also brings up another tool, this one from cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, cognitive reframing.
Yes, another really useful technique. This is about consciously catching those negative or unhelpful thought patterns and actively challenging them, reshaping them.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The essay uses a good one. You make a mistake at work. The automatic thought might be, I made a mistake. I'm terrible at my job.
Okay, a very common reaction.
Right. Cognitive reframing would be catching that thought and changing it to something like, okay, I made a mistake. This is a chance to figure out what went wrong and learn how to do better next time.
So shifting from self-blame to a learning mindset. And the science backs this up. It's not just, thinking positively.
No, it's actually retraining the brain. By consciously choosing to reframe, you're starting to build those new, healthier neural pathways we talked about earlier. The essay mentions you can often see measurable improvements in emotional regulation and resilience within weeks or months of practice.
Okay, so the big takeaway from the science section seems to be this. There's real biological evidence that our inner world isn't static. What we do with our thoughts, where we place our attention, it fundamentally changes us. And, importantly, that change is possible often faster than we might think with consistent practice.
It really validates the power of being intentional with our mental lives, doesn't it?
It does. Now, this leads into a really interesting, maybe slightly more speculative part of the essay. It moves from the personal brain changes to the idea of a ripple effect, our thoughts affecting things outwards.
Yes, this is where it touches on some ideas that are, let's say, thought-provoking, even if scientifically debated.
Like the work of Masaru Emoto.
Exactly. His controversial research suggested that thoughts and words directed at water could somehow impact its physical structure, like ice crystals. Now, the essay is very clear. This is scientifically debated, not widely accepted.
Right. Important clarification.
But the essay uses this idea, whether literally true or not, to tap into something deeper, maybe more intuitive, the sense that our inner state, our feelings, our dominant thoughts, they don't just stay locked inside. They seem to radiate outwards somehow.
Affecting the world around us, maybe the people around us.
And the metaphor of water becomes quite potent when you remember the essay points out our bodies are about 70% water. So, symbolically, the idea that our internal weather might have an outward effect resonates, regardless of the specific water crystal experiments.
And this outward ripple is undeniable when we think about social interactions, isn't it? The essay draws a direct line from unchecked private thoughts to how we actually speak and behave publicly.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Where does biting sarcasm come from? Or lashing out in anger? Or a dismissive comment? Often they start as private judgments, frustrations, irritations simmering inside.
And if we don't examine or regulate those inner thoughts,
They spill out, they manifest in our words, our tone, our actions.
and the consequence, the essay argues, is pretty serious. It's like a slow corrosion of our shared spaces, our public life.
Yeah, when conversations are dominated by unchecked reactions, anger, contempt, defensiveness, it just breaks down our ability to listen, to understand each other, to find common ground, or even compromise.
It fuels division and hostility.
The essay gives examples like political debates turning into shouting matches, or, social media comment sections becoming toxic, places where thoughtful discussion just gets drowned out by outrage and personal attacks.
It almost feels like some platforms reward that kind of reactivity, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The loudest, most outraged voice gets the attention.
That seems to be part of the dynamic, yeah. The essay suggests the risk is that when we interact, online or off, without that internal pause, that moment of reflection, we end up eroding trust, empathy, and the very possibility of having constructive conversations.
So the health of our public discourse isn't just about rules or policies. It's deeply tied to the inner state of the individuals involved.
That's the core argument here. Healthy societies need people who can manage their thoughts and emotions, who can engage respectfully even when they disagree, who exercise some self-restraint. Without that inner work, the essay warns, we risk poisoning our communities.
Making it harder and harder to find understanding. It really raises the stakes for our personal inner lives.
It definitely does.
Now, this whole idea of the struggle with the mind, the need for inner mastery, it's obviously not new. The essay does a great job showing how this pops up across so many different wisdom traditions throughout history.
It really is a universal human theme. Take Buddhism, for instance. Mindfulness, or sati, is central. It's about cultivating this non-judgmental attention to the present moment.
Learning to just observe thoughts and feelings as they arise.
Exactly. Without immediately getting tangled up in them or believing there's absolute truth, it creates that space we talked about.
The essay quotes, "With our thoughts, we make the world." That really captures it, doesn't it? Our inner state shaping our experience.
It does. And the simple act of returning your attention to your breath during meditation is a concrete way to practice disengaging from those runaway thoughts.
Then there's Hinduism. The Bhagavad Gita talks a lot about self-mastery. The quote mentioned is, "For one who has conquered the mind is the best of friends."
That's such a powerful framing. Seeing the mind not as an enemy, but as a potential ally, but only through effort and discipline.
Islam has concepts like mujahada, striving against the lower self, the ego, and tazkiyah, which is about purifying the heart or soul.
And the emphasis on intention, actions are judged by intentions, points directly to the importance of that inner state before the outward act.
Judaism values Kavanah, which is about intentionality and devotion, and the Musar tradition focuses on moral discipline, guiding the mind towards holiness.
And we can't forget the Stoics. They're almost synonymous with this idea of inner control.
Right. Epictetus saying, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters.
Yeah.
That puts the power squarely back on our internal response.
And Marcus Aurelius, the emperor philosopher, writing notes to himself like, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength.
It's quite striking how all these different paths from different times and places converge on this core idea.
Yeah.
What happens inside our heads is fundamentally important, and they all offer ways to work with it.
Absolutely. And as the essay notes, it's fascinating to see how modern psychological tools like the mindfulness techniques or the cognitive reframing from CBT actually provide practical methods that align so well with these ancient practices.
It suggests there's some enduring wisdom here about the human condition, doesn't it?
It really does. These aren't just historical curiosities. They tap into something fundamental about how we can navigate our inner worlds more effectively.
Building on that philosophical thread, the essay brings in some other thinkers to specifically explore the link between our inner lives and how we show up in the public sphere.
Right. We mentioned the Stoics already, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius. The essay revisits them to emphasize how their focus on self-control isn't just for personal peace, but it's actually crucial for being a responsible citizen. You need that inner regulation to engage constructively.
That makes sense. Who else does it bring in?
Søren Kierkegaard, the Christian existentialist, he wrote a lot about the struggle for an authentic self, pushing against the pressures and distractions of what he called the crowd.
That feels incredibly relevant today, doesn't it? With social media, the constant noise, his struggle to find real interiority, to face one's own anxiety, feels very current.
It really does. Then there's Hannah Arendt, the political philosopher. She had this powerful warning about the danger of thoughtlessness.
Not meaning stupidity, right? But something else.
Exactly. She meant the failure, or maybe the refusal, to stop and think critically, to reflect on what's happening around us and our own part in it. She saw this lack of critical reflection as creating the conditions where terrible things could happen on a societal level.
Wow. So a failure of inner reflection can actually be a profound moral danger for society.
That's her argument. It highlights that cultivating a reflective mind is more than just self-help. It's a civic duty, in a way. The essay also mentions Jürgen Habermas and his idea of the public sphere.
The space for rational debate.
Yes, the ideal space where citizens can discuss important issues openly and rationally. It's foundational for democracy. But that kind of debate relies on individuals who can think clearly, listen well, and respond thoughtfully, not just reactively.
Which circles back to that inner self-regulation.
It does. And finally, the essay includes Friedrich Nietzsche. He was critical of traditional religion and morality, but the essay highlights his challenge to herd mentality, to blindly following the crowd.
Resisting thoughtless conformity.
Right. Nietzsche urged people to examine their own values, to think for themselves. In our age of algorithms feeding us information and online groupthink being so pervasive, his call to cultivate independent thought feels, well, pretty urgent.
So pulling these philosophers together, the message is that mastering the mind, cultivating self-control, authenticity, critical thinking, resisting conformity, this isn't just a private project. It's fundamentally a civic and moral task. It shapes our communities.
It elevates the personal struggle. What happens inside us has real consequences out there.
Now, alongside all these perspectives, the essay dedicates significant attention to a specific Christian viewpoint, drawing from the New Testament.
Yes, it pivots to offer that particular lens. It really centers on a specific verse. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5, it talks about taking captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ.
Taking captive every thought. That phrase sounds quite strong. What does the essay suggest it means in practice? Is it about suppressing thoughts?
The essay argues no, it's not about repression or harsh control. It frames it more as an active alignment.
Alignment, how so?
It's about evaluating your thoughts, holding them up against the standard in this context, the standard of truth, love, God's character and purposes, and then consciously redirecting them. It's like choosing which thoughts get to stay and build a home in your mind.
So less about just blocking negative thoughts, more about actively choosing and cultivating different ones.
Exactly, a positive redirection. And the SS connects this to other biblical ideas too.
Like which ones?
Well, Romans 12.2 talks about being transformed by the renewing of your mind, suggesting an ongoing process. Proverbs 4.23 says to guard your heart, because everything you do flows from it. It sees the inner life as the source.
Okay.
Colossians 3.2 encourages setting your minds on things above. Philippians 4.8 gives that famous list, think about whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable.
Giving concrete things to focus the mind on.
Right. And Isaiah 26.3 links a steadfast mind, one trusting God with perfect peace. Matthew 22.3 slogan includes loving God with all your mind. Psalm 19.14 hopes the meditation of the heart will be pleasing to God. There's a real recurring theme about the importance of the inner landscape.
So in this framework, taking thoughts captive is about managing the negative, yes, but also actively cultivating thoughts aligned with truth and love as understood in that tradition.
Precisely. The essay gives a down-to-earth example. Imagine a coworker criticizes you and you immediately feel irritated, defensive.
Okay.
Holding that thought captive in this view isn't just stuffing down the anger, it's pausing, questioning that first reactive thought, how dare they, then reflecting on principles like compassion or humility, or maybe seeing if there's truth in the criticism, then reframing your internal response based on those principles before you actually say or do anything.
That internal pause again, the moment of evaluation and redirection.
Yes. And the essay concludes this part by suggesting the core Christian invitation here isn't ultimately about sheer willpower, about controlling thoughts all on your own. It's framed more as surrender.
Surrender.
Inviting God into that inner space, allowing a transformation to happen through that relationship, aligning the mind towards wholeness and God's purposes. It shifts the focus from pure self-effort to a kind of partnership.
Okay, so it's presented as a path of transformation working with a higher power, rather than just self-mastery alone.
That's the essence of the perspective offered there.
So when we engage in this work, drawing from science, philosophy, different traditions, this specific biblical path, what does the essay say is the result? What's the fruit of this captive mind?
The essay paints a picture of peace, clarity, and freedom. Those are the words it uses.
Peace, clarity, freedom. That sounds profoundly different from being stuck in those anxious loops we started with.
It's presented as a fundamental shift. Instead of being constantly tossed around by every fearful thought or angry impulse, you become more anchored.
Anchored how?
Anchored in a sense of peace that isn't totally dependent on what's happening around you. Anchored in a clarity that lets you see things, and maybe people, more truly. And anchored in a freedom from being tyrannized by your own unchecked thoughts and emotions. It builds resilience, maybe even opens up space for joy.
The essay uses a final metaphor to describe this, doesn't it?
Yes, a really lovely one. It compares our minds to gardens. Instead of being battlefields overrun with chaotic, weedy thoughts or maybe deserts of anxiety, through this intentional work, this cultivation, our minds can become places where wisdom, peace, and compassion can genuinely flourish.
From chaos or barrenness to a flourishing garden. That's a hopeful image.
It really is. It suggests the struggle isn't the whole story. Transformation is possible.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, looking at the ideas and hold captive every thought, we've covered quite a bit. We've seen neuroscience confirming the brain can change. We've explored how our inner world might ripple outwards into our public lives. We've touched on the wisdom across diverse traditions, all pointing to the importance of the mind.
We looked at philosophers connecting inner reflection to civic health, and we considered the specific Christian invitation focused on aligning the mind through a relationship with God.
It really underscores that this inner work, managing our thoughts, it's not just some niche self-help thing. It seems fundamental to who we are, how we connect with others, and maybe even the kind of society we build.
Absolutely. And for listeners exploring that Christian angle presented in the essay, it frames this universal challenge as a journey that's ultimately about transformation through surrender and relationship, not just willpower.
It provides a particular map for navigating that inner world with intention and perhaps hope.
Yeah.
So as you listening, reflect on all these perspectives, science, philosophy, spirituality, all aimed at this core human task of living well with our own minds. Maybe consider the final thought the essay leaves us with.
Yeah.
In the middle of this noisy world, and maybe a chaotic inner life sometimes, what one thought might you need to pause on today? To examine, maybe gently hold captive, in order to move towards a little more peace, a bit more intention. The essay suggests that finding that stillness, that clarity, that freedom, it starts right there, with the choices you make about the thoughts in your own mind.
We live in a time when our thoughts are constantly under assault, from fear, from distraction, from noise. But we're not powerless. Holding each thought captive isn't about control. It is about awareness. It's about choosing what shapes our minds, our actions, and ultimately our lives. Thank you for joining me today. If this episode stirred something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And as you go back into the world, remember, the battle for your mind is real, but so is the freedom that comes from paying attention. Until next time, take care of your thoughts, because they are shaping who you become. Goodbye for now.